In this video, we're going to learn about the basics of engineering drawings in PTC Creo and discuss adding annotations with proper technique. I'm going to start a new drawing and select drawing. And it doesn't matter if I have used default template selected, I can change it later. For my model, I'm going to browse and select the part that I made for this tutorial. And for my template, you can choose from existing templates, or you may have a custom template for a class or for your job someday. So I made one for this tutorial that I'm going to open and hit OK. In my custom template, I have it asking me for several things to fill out this box on the bottom. So I'm going to fill those in now. The first thing I want to go through is the mouse controls. So you're going to left click to select, and you can click the middle mouse button to pan. You don't need to hold the shift key since this is two-dimensional. We're already familiar with the File tab. This is where you can open, close, and manage your session. In the Layout tab, you can lock view movement. So right now I have that selected, and if I click on any of my drawings, I can't move them. But if I unselect this and I click on my drawings, it allows me to move them around. I also have sheet properties and formatting here. If I go to this model views, this is where I can add a drawing or a general view. So a general view is something that stands alone like this. And a projection view depends on a parent view. So this over here is my right view, and it depends on this front view. It has to stay in line with this front view, so I can move it left and right, but I can't move it up and down. And the same goes for my top view. I can move it up and down, but not left and right because it has to stay aligned with my front view. If I move my front view, it will move the other drawings accordingly. If I click on a certain view, I can use edit properties to modify this view. So I can change the name, I can change the type to a projection or an auxiliary, which we'll get to that later. I can change what view we're looking at. So if I want this to be a bottom view, I can select bottom, hit apply, and see how it is affected. I can change my visible area to be a full view or a half view. I can have my scale align with the sheet scale, which is shown down here is 0.5, or I can make a custom scale if I want it to be bigger. This is where I can manage my section views, but we're going to get into that a little more later. I can view states. View display is where I can show different display styles. So typically for a trimetric view, we want the shading with edges, but if it were an orthographic view, this is where I can change it to show hidden lines. Origin and alignment. I'm going to hit OK and keep everything as it was. Like I said, the projection view has to come from a parent view. So if I select projection view and I don't have any views chosen, I have to pick one to project from. I can move it upwards to show the top view, or left to show the front view, back view. Wherever I place it, it will decide what view it is. Auxiliary view is used to view sides that are not typical, so not your front, side, and top views. So if you look here on this surface, you can see I have a lot of detail that you can't get from a typical view. So I want to hit my auxiliary view, click on that surface, and I can project it out to the side. And I can move these over to create a little more space for that. I'm going to edit my properties, and because this is an orthographic view, I want to change this to show hidden lines. And for auxiliary views, it is customary to show arrows. I'm going to go back to view type, and for projection arrows, I'm going to hit double. And I forgot to rename those arrows. I'm going to call this view A. And you can see right here, it's a little hard to see, there's a lot going on. We can see my projection arrows here. If I want to make a detailed view, I need to select a focal point and then draw a closed shape around it. And I can click my middle mouse button when I'm done. And now I just want to drop it by clicking somewhere on the drawing. This will show a zoomed in view of whatever I have enclosed in my sketch. And I can edit the scale here. Now I want to go back to my section view. So this right here is a front view, but maybe I could get more out of this drawing if it were a section view. I'm going to click on it, hit edit properties, and go to section. I want a 2D cross section, and I'm going to create a new one. I have planar and single selected. I'm going to hit done, and I want to enter a name. A is already taken, so I'm going to call this B. Now it's asking me to select the plane that I want the section view to come from, which is this front plane. I can go over here and I can choose which view I want the arrow display to be placed on. I'm going to hit the top view and hit OK. We can see these B arrows here. And this looks a little funny. Typically when we see a section view, we see these hashed lines. And if I zoom in, you can see that they are there. They're just really close together. So when I zoom out, it looks like a solid color. Moving on, we can go to the table tab and create a table like this one I used for the title block. Tables are often used to show revisions or a bill of materials. To add this, I'm going to hit table and drop it somewhere in my drawing. Next, we can go to the Annotate tab, and this is where we can create or modify annotations. So I have the dimension feature, which is where I can add a dimension that I may have missed. I can add a note somewhere, maybe down here, saying all rounds are 0.5. I want to add a note for the machinist or whoever may be looking at this drawing. I can also use other annotations and symbols as shown here. I can use the sketch tab to add any complementary sketches. Legacy migration, you don't need to worry about this. It's used to add a model to a drawing. Analysis is where you can use your mass properties, but you will need to input the material. In the Review tab, this is where we review the drawing before publishing. In the Tools tab is where parameters and relations are, and you can switch between a drawing and a template. I'm going to come back to that in just a minute. In the View tab is where you can manage views that you already have, and in the Framework tab is where you can adjust the framework of the drawing. Going back to the Tools tab, this is where I mentioned you can go into your template view. So I'm going to select template and click on a template view. One thing that I want to note is for this template, snap lines were included, which are these dotted lines here, and dimensions were also included so that all my dimensions pop up as soon as this drawing is opened. But I'm going to go back into my drawing view and continue with annotations. Like I said, these dotted lines are called snap lines. These are defined in our template, and this is where it is suggested to place dimensional values. So if I want to move a dimension, it will lock onto this line, and it will help us keep them a little more organized. If I have a dimension like in the front view, there's just a lot going on here. Maybe I want to move it to a different view. I can click on my dimension, and this button here is move to view. If I select it, I can choose a different view to move that dimension onto. So you can see it got moved up here, and I can put it on my snap lines. Another thing I can do is I can change my arrow format. If I click on my dimension, I can move them to the outside, or for a diameter, let me move that where we can see it. I can break the dimension in a different direction, or I can point to the outside edge of that feature. If I want to add a center line to this hole, I can click on my part and use this Show Model Annotations button. This will show me all my center lines. I can click on the one that I want to add and it will get checked. If I want to add all of them, I can check all these boxes, but for now I'm just going to check this top one and hit OK, and you can see that my center line has been added to that hole. The last thing I want to go over is adjusting annotations. So I want to talk about this counter bore here. And you don't want to just go deleting dimensions ordinarily, but for the sake of this tutorial, I want to clear up some space. I want to grab this outer diameter here. I'm going to click on my dimension and use this dimension text feature. Down here is where I can add any symbols I might need. This box is for a prefix, so diameter symbol would be this prefix, and @d is the reference dimension value. For my counter bore, I want to first reference the inner diameter. I'm going to look for my diameter symbol. It's right here. And let me look for that inner diameter. I can see right here that it is this 0.25 value. And that goes through all. Next, I have the counter bore. So I'm going to make it clear that we're referring to the counter bore for the second line. I have my referenced dimension. And I want to add the depth. So I'm going to look for my depth symbol right here. And I can see the depth of this counter bore right here is 0.25. And I can see that this is the format that I want to use to dimension this hole without having it be 4 separate dimensions. The only issue with this is that if I update this model, if I change any of these dimensions, none of this text will be updated. If I want to make my text update with the part, I have to reference parameters instead of numbers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look for this 0.25 and figure out what that parameter is. If I want to reference parameters, I can go into tools and switch dimensions here so I can see which values go to which parameters, but I've put this in my quick access toolbar, so I'm going to use it there. Here is this 0.25 diameter. If I switch dimensions, I can see that that is D15. So instead of 0.25, I'm going to change that to D15. But as you can see, it's just changing it to the text D15 instead of the actual value. If I want it to be the actual value, I have to add this and symbol here, and you can see it becomes this 0.25. Last is this depth of 0.25 for my counter bore, which I can see is right here. If I look for the parameter associated with that, I can see that it's D18. So I'm going to do the same here as well. And now I can see that these are the dimensions I'm looking for, and they will update with my part.